All right, so this is point slope form level 1 and 2, and we have not been familiar with point slope form yet. So this is a brand new form. This is a brand new thing. So we're starting off with something new. So make sure that you at least get this part here written, because this is a brand new form for us. Before we jump in right away, I'm going to go right here to the level 1, just because this is passing. So if you can answer this question correctly, then that means that you at least have passed the standard and we can move forward, right? Now, the one part that's tricky about this standard is you cannot get a 1 if you do not get your positives and your negatives correct. So we want to be careful about that, and that's what we're going to practice with this first set of boxes here. So this says identify the slope and a point from the equation. So if you see down here, these are all equations, and from these equations you have to tell what the point was in that equation and what the slope was in that equation. So that's what we're focusing on today. Okay, so first thing I need to do is I need to give you the form. What is point slope form? So here we go. Point slope form is y minus. Okay, and then this next part is going to be a number, but this is just the formula, so the formula is not going to have any numbers in it. So this is y sub 1. That's what the formula looks like, but that is going to be substituted with a number. So if you look down here, that number is the number 1. It says y minus 1. Okay, then it's going to be equals, kind of like you see in this example here, equals, and then here there's a fraction. Well, it could be a fraction, but it doesn't have to be a fraction. So that number right there is our slope. So in my form up here, I'm going to put the letter M, because M represents slope. Okay, so underneath here, I'm going to write that. That is our slope. So the first thing you are asked to do is identify the slope. The slope is this number right here. That's it. Boom. I'm already at a 0.5. Okay. Now it's going to be a parenthesis. So see how this has a parenthesis. Then it's going to be a parenthesis. The letter X. Always the letter X is going to come next. That's going to stay a letter. Minus. And then this is going to be a number. It's going to be your X number. Okay, so let's clarify a few things before we move on. First thing we want to clarify is this number right here does stand for the slope. The same as when we were doing our form earlier. I'm going to slide this up, so don't want to make you seasick. So our form earlier was y equals mx plus b, where this number in front of the x was the slope. This is very similar to that. The number in front of the x is still the slope. This is very similar to that. This is just a different form where this showed you the slope and this showed you the y-intercept. This time we're not showing you the y-intercept, we're showing you a point that happens to be on that line. So the point on this particular line is the point x1, comma, y1. That is a point on the line. Okay, now why do we need a point on the line? Well, it's for the graphing sake, and that's what we're going to be doing to get a level 2 and a level 3, actually, is to be able to graph these equations, okay, given to us in this form. So the first part we're going to go through, and we're going to find the slope of all of these. So I'll write m equals, that's the slope. M equals, right across the top, m equals. So this should be the easy part, because that's just going to be the number in front of x. So because we're just going to focus on this part, I'm going to zoom in a little bit so we can see that slope a little bit better, because we're done talking about our scale, so I can focus in a little bit more. So our slope here is 3/4. Now, let's just take a second to remind ourselves that this means we're going to go up 3 and we're going to go over to the right 4. Do you remember that? That when we were counting this slope, that means we would count up 3 and then to the right 4. Okay, that's just a reminder. You don't need that at this very second, but it's good for us to remember for what's coming next, okay? Okay, slide over. What's the slope here? I'm going to stall so that you can kind of point to it yourself before I point to it. -2. So that's -2. Remember, you can write that as -2/1 because that means we're going to go down 2 and to the right 1. Again, that's for level 2 and 3, but identifying it -2, that's good enough for our 0.5. Okay, I'm going to slide this over. Next one, point to the slope. Boom, there it is, 1/5, which means I'm going to go up 1 and to the right 5 when I'm ready to do that. Okay. All right, this next part is when it gets a little bit trickier. So now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be identifying the point that is on this line. Let me go back to the first one. So we're going to give an x comma y. So x, y. So that's x1, y1. That's what we're giving here, x1, y1. Okay, so a little note to self. Hint, the x number that goes here is next to the letter x. Okay, so here's the x. So this number is going to go here. Okay, so I'll do a little arrow here. That number goes there. 7. Then the y number, the number that's next to the y, goes in the y spot. 1. That point, 7, 1, is on the line. Okay, now, you might be asking yourself right now, how come I didn't put -7? How come I didn't put -1? Well, if you look up here, the formula is y minus. So that minus sign is a part of the formula. It is not a part of this number, and that's the number that we want. We want to pull this number out. We don't want to pull out this negative sign. And I understand that a lot of times I tell you that the sign in front of the number goes with the number. So it's going to be very tricky for you to kind of break that up. I just want this number. I don't want this part of the formula. Okay, so it's going to be a little bit tricky here at first. All right, let's go to the next one. So on the next one, if you are working ahead and you've already done this, make sure that you look back up when I write the answer here to make sure that your answer matches with my answer. Okay, so remember that when you're writing down a point is listed out as x comma y. Remember, x goes first and then y, x, y, z. Goes first alphabetically and it goes first in the point, which is tricky because this number for the slope, the y number goes on the top and the x number goes on the bottom. That's why this is going to be hard. Your brain is going to have to really pay attention to what's going on here. So this 1 is going to go in for the x and the 5 is going to go in for the y. Okay. All right, next one. So the number next to the x gets to go into the x slot. The number next to the y gets to go in the y slot. Now, before you move on too fast, did you notice that this sign was a plus? Did you notice that? So how could that have been a plus? It's supposed to be a minus in the formula. So how did that change to be a plus? The only way to change it to a plus is it must have been y minus a -3. That would have made me write +3. So when you see a plus, this is where it gets to be a little bit trickier. When you see a plus, that plus means that that 3 was negative. Okay, I'm going to try to explain that again because that can get a little bit confusing, but we have a couple more examples. Okay, so we're going to go down to D, E, and F. We're going to do it together one time, and then I'll pause for a second for you to do E and F, and then we'll come back and check our answer, okay? All right, here we go. So I don't even have slope on here, so let's get the slope down first. M equals. So that's this number here, 3. Okay, now let's get our point. Remember, points go x comma y. Okay, so that's x1 and y1 in the formula. That is what you are putting down here. So the number x1 is the number that's next to the x. So that's a 2. Now, the formula says it's supposed to be a minus right here. So the only way this could have been a positive is if that 2 was negative when I put it in. Okay. Another way to remember this is we're always just going to switch the sign. Okay, if that's an easier way for you to remember it, those signs are always going to be the opposite of what you see in the equation. So you might say, oh, this says -4. Well, then I'm going to write a +4. Okay, so that's another way. It's pretty simplified version of why is it a minus, why is it a plus. It's just always going to be the opposite sign. Okay. Okay, if you're watching the video, just go ahead and pause the video, try E and F, and then check your answers here. The slope is not typically the difficult part. So the slope here, -2/5. Slope here is 1/3. The one thing to know is I always try to put the negative up with the top number. So that's what I did when I actually wrote it down here. But it doesn't matter if it's with the top or if it's with the bottom. But you just can't put it with both. Okay, so then right here, that's a +6, which means I'm going to write -6. That says -8, so I'm going to write +8. Go over to the x, that says +7, so I'm going to write -7. That says +2, so I'm going to write -2. Okay, so moving on, we have just our special cases right here at the bottom. So these look a little bit different because they're missing a number. And if it's missing a number, that means that number was 0. So right here, it's missing this number next to the y. So what happened was, it was y minus 0. And it's missing it because you don't have to write the 0. That's why it's gone. Okay, so my slope is still the same. That's pretty straightforward. Again, it's -3/2. That's your slope. And then my point. So my point, that says -3. I'm going to write 3. There was nothing over here by the y, so I'm going to write the number for nothing, which is 0. Okay, so if you see something missing or a number that's not there, that number is going to be 0. So same thing here on this next one. There's no number on this backside, and there's not even a parenthesis. But there's not a parenthesis because of the fact that there's no number here. So that is also a 0. So my slope, again, is going to be that -4. And you can write -4/1, or you can just leave it as -4. Right here, we're just identifying. So this part, it actually doesn't matter if you write it as a fraction or not. So the number next to x didn't exist. There was nothing there. So the number for nothing, that says +5. So I'm going to write -5. Okay, so same thing here. We can pause here. And you can try I, and then check to see if you got the answer right. Okay, the next part of this is now we're going to take what we just did and we're actually going to put it on the graph and we're going to graph these equations. I'm going to zoom out just a bit because I want to have a little bit of space to write on the side so you can understand what's going on here. And you can have that note for later. Okay, so again, tell me what the slope is. A little bit tricky on this one because there's not a number, but I know that there actually is a 1 there. Okay, so my slope, I'm going to write this off to the side. My slope, m equals -1, which is -1 over 1. Okay, which means in a minute when I go to actually graph this, I'm going to go down 1 and to the right 1. Okay, now that's just for when we actually get started here. Okay, my point from this equation, start on the x, where the x is. The x goes first. So the x is -4, because it says +4, so the opposite of that is -4. Go to the y, the opposite of -2 is a +2. Okay, so I've done my identifying piece right there. So I'm at level 1. So I have identified correctly. I am at a level 1. Okay, now moving forward, I need to graph this. Okay, I'm going to put those steps right here at the bottom. So what we're going to do is we're going to plot the point -4, 2. Now, just in case, I'm going to put that we are going to go left 4, up 2. That's what that means to plot the point -4, 2. So -4, 2 is a dot right here, and I'm actually going to put a dot there. Then, from there, from that dot, count the slope. And that'll get you your second dot. Okay, ready to do that? Okay, so we're going to take this. We're going to go down 1, right 1. Now, to help us make sure our line is straight when we draw it, you can do that a couple more times. So down 1 to the right 1. And now we connect. So here is the line. You can see right there, there would be the y-intercept. I had a nice y-intercept. I just didn't have it in the form to use a y-intercept. So here's a point on the line, and then we can use the slope to find another point. We need 2 points in order to connect the dots and draw a line. Okay, so that's how we get our 2 dots to graph this line. Okay, I'm going to slide this over just a little bit, but I want to keep this steps here, these steps here, so when we do the next one, we have the steps. Okay, so the slope on this next one, slope is easy to identify. It's just this number right here in front of the parentheses. So my slope is 3/4, which remember that's rise over run. So this is up and to the right. Okay, and then my point. This says x minus 1, so I'm going to write a +1. This says y plus 5, so I'm going to write a -5. Okay, so first thing we do is we're going to plot that point. So to plot this point, this is in the x direction. Remember, this is the x-axis. Right to left, this is the x-axis, and then this one here is the y-axis. So if I have an x number, I have to do that on the x-axis. So that means I'm going to go right 1, comma, down 5. That's how I plot that point. So I go right and then I go down. All right, so right 1, down 5. That is your first dot on the graph. From there, you count, says from that dot, count the slope. So from that dot, I'm going to go up 3 and over 4. So up 3 and over 4 to the right. Where this gets tricky is when you're counting. To plot the point, you go over first and then down. But to do the slope, you have to go up first and then to the right. So it's actually backwards between doing the two dots that you need, which is how this can get pretty confusing pretty fast. Okay, so let's do the last one, and then the next page is practice. So let's first get our slope and our point. And that's going to be -4 over 1. We need that over 1 for when we count the slope, which means I'm going to go down first and then to the right. Okay, and then this one is missing a number. So when we do the actual point here, when we're doing the identifying the parts, this +2 means that it had to have been a -2. And then it's missing a number here, so that's 0. So remember, this is x, this is y. So on the x-axis, I go to -2, and then I don't go up any. So that's my first dot. So I got to plot that point, -2, 0. That's right here. Then from there, I count my slope, which is rise over run. So from there, I'm going to rise. In this case, I'm going to go down. And then to the right 1. Okay. Let's do some practice.